Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be an episode on who will or why this upcoming pattern change may produce big storms and cold weather. So I have gotten a lot of requests about this. People have been asking me, can I please, can you do this video? So I will be doing this. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so by subscribing and liking the video, and it helps my channel grow, helps me make more videos, and helps me stay on the road. So thank you for doing that. So the first thing I'd like to look at is the CPC Climate Prediction Center, their teleconnection forecast. So this is the ensemble forecast of the AO, which I'll explain in just a minute what it means. And you can see that the AO index will be going into the negatives over the next course of the next couple of days and weeks. So you can see the beginning part of January, first couple of days, maybe staying above, but then it just crashes. One model has it going a little bit up and then crashing, but that's just one outlier. Most models have it crashing. So what does a negative AO mean? And right in here, I have an image pulled up, Arctic oscillation. And as we all know, we're going to be going into as I showed you, we're going to be going into a negative phase of an AO. So the difference between a negative and positive AO is negative. We have a colder stratosphere in the North Pole area, and that brings colder conditions into the eastern, especially the eastern part of the country, and into Europe. That also means weaker trade winds and more sun and more calm conditions across the England and across Britain. So a positive phase, on the other hand, is I think I said colder for negative. It is colder for the positive and warmer, less cold for the negative. But for the positive, it's colder, and that brings the cold a little bit further to the east of the United States. So the United States doesn't really get impacted by this, but we get southeastern Canada and Labrador, Newfoundland definitely get more of this cold in the positive phase. But as of now, we will be going into a negative phase. We were in a positive phase, not too positive, but we were in a positive phase, and now we're going to be crashing down into the negative. And remember, around that November time frame where we had those cold shots was also very negative. We could be looking at something similar like that. So the next teleconnection I'd like to look at is the NAO, North Atlantic Oscillation. And this one is actually not too favorable of a stormy and cold pattern, but I'd still like to show it to you because there's, it's goes negative, and it's already negative, dips into the negatives, and it straddles the neutral line. Basically, some models are showing it being above average, some models are showing it into negative indices, or not above average, I should say, into the positive, and some are showing negative indices. So as we saw, it's going to be between a neutral or a positive, maybe a positive NAO and a negative NAO. So a negative phase of an NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, is when the high pressure is dominant across the upper northern Atlantic Ocean, and that sends the jet stream buckling up all the way into Greenland, while it sends a low, or the lobe of the polar vortex, down into the eastern United States. The jet stream dips down, and the storm track is across the eastern United States. And not every NAO negative is the same. Sometimes its jet stream can be right across right across the Northeast, which is just a breeding ground for storms with the warm moist air from the south, the cold air from the north, just breeding ground for heavy snows. Now, I couldn't find an image that was side by side showing the positive, but I have a different image, and this is what a positive phase of the NAO looks like. So the high is more off, not in the North Atlantic Ocean, but it's more off into the most furthest eastern point of the North American continent, and we see the low not really over the United States or in Canada. It's out in Greenland, and we see that cold air not really making its way into the United States, and kind of just making warm conditions across the east, and not necessarily good for snow conditions. So at this point, just based off the NAO, we may be going into a not so clear pattern. But again, there's so many other factors that are showing that we are like the AO, and I'll be showing you the PNA right now. I think the PNA right here. So the PNA is going to be positive. It doesn't look like it's going to be extremely positive, but it's going to be positive. You could see fairly positive right now, dipping down, but still staying positive and not being negative. So that's the most important thing, not being negative. So let's go to the PNA. What does a positive PNA and negative PNA mean? Positive PNA, we have a huge high pressure, basically a giant ridge across the west. And most people know at this point that when we have a ridge in the west, that means a trough in the east. That's just basically, that's just a basic meteorology right there across North America. We see cold air forcing itself to the south, and when we see a negative PNA, so not what we're going to be seeing is when we're seeing wet, cold. Wet is going to be cold and wet. We have a low pressure down in here, and a east, which is warm and dry. And according to the teleconnections, we're going to be going into a a positive phase. So with this image, more of this where the cold air forces itself south, and with cold air with this storm track, you can see the jet stream is basically where the storm track is between these two areas of contracting or contrasting anomalies. We could be seeing those storms riding into the central United States and up into the northeast, again a breeding ground for nor'easters, and many Alberta clippers also going through the country, which, as we all know, or you should know, that an Alberta clipper many Alberta clippers have formed into nor'easters before, and the more Alberta clippers there are, it's a direct correlation with the more nor'easters there will be. So, I would also like to show you this one Twitter page. It's called Judah Cohen, and this guy's this guy's marvelous. He does all this talking about the Greenland blocking, the potential for a colder pattern or a warmer pattern depending on what's going on. I don't want to look at this too much because I don't want to get copyrighted strikes, but if you want to check out his weather page, it's on Twitter. It's on Judah Cohen, and again, he's talking about winter coming back. So there's many people talking about this. This is many channels are also doing these type of videos. This is a definite comeback to winter, and at this point, it seems like the winter is going to be making a big comeback into January and February. So right now, we're looking at the GFS 500 millibar geopotential height and anomalies, and this basically helps to show us where the troughs and ridges set up. And this may look a little bit weird, but this is the northern hemisphere, the region I've pulled up, and there is Russia, the East Asia area. Here's Europe, here's Africa, and then here we have our continent, North America, and there's Greenland. So the thing is, I wanted to point out is around this time we are seeing a Greenland block being fairly persistent. You can see showing right there, and I just have this article pulled up here. This is about a previous storm pattern, but it still applies because it talks about how the Greenland block will lead to wonky weather, and it does. Again, the Greenland blocking pattern was the one that led to Hurricane Sandy cook into the west and do that weird forecasting turn that many people didn't predict, and that's why it impacted parts of the Northeast. But the overall thing is that the Greenland blocks develop over the North Atlantic in the vicinity of Greenland or Iceland, and it basically forms because we see a lot of storms that ride up across America or anywhere across the North American continent and go up into the North Atlantic Ocean, into Europe, and we see they bring in warm air. With the storms, we see a lot of warm air from the southern Atlantic Ocean, or at least the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean, and they bring in, let me draw this out, they bring in warm air into this area right here with the storm track anywhere from, it doesn't really matter as long as they end up in the North Atlantic Ocean. They bring warm air in and it stays here, being blocked by all of these basically these small chunks of the polar vortex and vortices that have broken apart, and this thing kind of stays in the middle, and we could kind of see that basically staying here. You could see maybe some weaker phases, some stronger phases, but we generally see a pretty defined blocking pattern, and that tends to again send the jet stream down into the eastern United States and tends to bring chillier conditions, maybe possible more nor'easters, several more Alberta Clippers into the United States, and again that directly correlates with nor'easters. So I think we're going to be definitely seeing a much colder active pattern. Let's go to the European ECMWF. That's what it's called, the European 500 middle bar with geopotential height and anomaly. This one shows it even more, and I like this model even better. Obviously, the GFS versus the European. In my opinion, the European is better, and many other people agree with me on that. And it shows, again, that very, very defined Greenland blocking high, and that will send a lot of the cold down into the eastern United States. And basically, what it shows, both the GFS is showing it as well, but maybe not as strongly as the European. But basically, what this means is winter is definitely coming, and it's coming back in a big way. So let's quickly go back just to the United States ConUS. Let's go back to regions, and let's just look at the temperature anomalies that could be occurring over the next couple of days using the FV3 GFS, since that is basically the better version of the GFS. It's going to be the replacement of the GFS in a couple of months, I'm fairly sure, if not sooner. So let's go to 2-meter temperature anomaly, and let's just start from hour 0 and see what this leads to us. What all this teleconnection, what all this Greenland blocking stuff is leading us to show. So right now, again, we're seeing a little bit cooler air, especially across the west. It's more of a negative PNA pattern where we see that wet and cold west and a warm and east. Warm and dry eastern part of the United States. If we go back here, you can see that's what we're looking at right now. But that quickly switches as we see the whole country just in generally warming up for that transition phase, I would say, between that potentially, very mild lake pattern into a colder pattern. This is probably the last push of warm weather before, again, you can see this is the latest FV3 GFS run, only goes out to 186. We could see some cooler air rushing in, starting to rush in. If we go to the previous model runs, I think they did show some cooler air starting to make its way in towards the end of the forecasting period. So basically, I would say that the start of January, maybe not the bitter cold, but then the end, you could see some definitely some cold starting to make its way into the country and being actually fairly dominant over the warm air. A colder and snowier pattern is definitely on the hold for us, and we could be looking for a fairly chilly and fairly active pattern going into January and especially February. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, hopefully you learned something new, and I'll catch you all guys in the next episode. See ya. Bye.